Hello to all fellow Pop-O-Holics. It's Christian here. This episode is brought to you by me, my band Midnight Satire. Midnight Satire's newest single, AR, is now streaming. The Alternative writes, AR is an interesting blend of organic and electronic. Postal Service-esque synths with a build-up that any emo fan would enjoy. It's a dream pop for a night drive, full of texture and drama. Those aren't my words. That B's a real music writer right there. I'd also like to announce Midnight Satire is partnering with the Youth Mental Health Project. They help equip communities with the tools to facilitate an open, honest dialogue about youth mental health so that parents and children get the help and resources they need. This is a wonderful, wonderful cause. You can donate today by searching for Midnight Satire on Instagram or Twitter or Facebook, following the link tree to the Youth Mental Health Project sponsorship page, and submitting a donation there. I encourage you to read up about it. It's a really great cause, and it's something I'm very passionate about. All right, let's get into the show. Welcome to Pop-O-Holics, a show about hot takes and hot, tasty pancakes. Why don't you come on down to the poor folks' home? We have a tussle. Today we talking about Landlady, Landlord, the Kung Fu Hustle. If this is your first time to the show, my name is Christian, your crazy host, and I'm joined as always by my two favorite
Cherry Poppin' Daddies.
Chris Conkling
and Brian Dupree.
I am the only one who does funny voices on the show, okay? That is a hard rule. Right. I'm the only one who's allowed to be funny, I'm the only one who can be funny, and I'm the most handsomest one of all. I said handsomest. Oh, yes. Wink, wink. Little piggy. Spank me. Anyway, I don't know where that went. What happened? Where are we going with this? Anyway, welcome to Pop-O-Holics.
Where are we? I blacked out.
Yeah, I blacked out for a second. This is Pop-O-Holics. If you haven't been here before, we do things a bit different around here. I don't know why that's become a catchphrase. I'm losing it.
This is like the casually intimidating, like racist thing, right? Like, do things a bit different around here.
All right, listen here. Just to let you know, we do things a bit different around here. You know, the most podcasts talk about movies. Have you seen how many movie podcasts there are? There's too many, in my opinion. It's so many. So we made another one, but we decided to do things a little bit different. And what we do is we theme our months, okay? We talk about like a main tempo thing in pop culture, whether it be a movie, a TV show, or a video game, and then we theme a month around the things that might have influenced it or are related to it. Right, so we did Kung Fu in honor of Shang-Chi, the newest Marvel film. We reviewed that earlier in the month, but we've covered such classics as Legend of Drunken Master, Enter the Dragon, Ip Man, and now we are arriving at quite the redheaded stepchild of them all.
I don't know about.
We are talking about a
I don't know.
Hey, the redheaded stepchild has a lot to bring to the table. We are about to have a very interesting conversation, boys. We are talking about 2004 Stephen Chow's Kung Fu Hustle.
Mrs. Slum Queen. Hey, landlady. Did you forget to pay your taxes? There's no more water down here.
Water doesn't just fall from the clouds, you know. You got a pretty big mouth for someone who's 4 months behind on his rent.
I was right in the middle of my monthly shampoo. I have a right to wash my hair.
Ah, you are a troublemaker. From now on, no water Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. And I'm rationing it Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays, and that's that. I've had it with all your whining and complaining. As though everything should be free here, assholes.
A delightful good morning, landlady.
Don't sweet-talk me, you worm. You catch up on your rent or I'll burn your store down. What? What's so funny? The same thing applies to you, you little
Ooh, I don't know what we're going to use. That was
Don't use that. Don't go as far as that clip did. If
that was from something from Kung Fu Hustle. It was hard to find a clip that was appropriate to play, as well as a trailer that would have provided you any context for this movie. This is Kung Fu Hustle, released in 2004. It was directed by Stephen Chow, written by Stephen Chow, Hua Jin, Chan Man-keung, Zhang Kan-cheung, and with a score by Raymond Wong, it had a budget of around $20 million, and it grossed $105 million internationally, with a cast starring Stephen Chow as the main character, Danny Chan, Kwok-kwan, Yuen Hua, Yun Chi, Siu-lung, and Xing Yu. And again, I apologize, during this whole month, we've had the most uncultured person that is a part of this show pronouncing a bunch of Chinese names, and I apologize for my mispronunciations, but I've tried my damnedest. What are we going to be talking about? Well, we're going to do a non-spoiler take, so if you haven't seen the movie, we'll give you some hot, fresh ones, just with no spoilers, and then we'll have a spoiler alert. We'll have a spoiler alert. And then go through some of our favorite moments and compare it to all the Kung Fu movies and have a nice Kung Fu movie wrap up. But let's dive into this one, Kung Fu Hustle, which we want to clarify. There is both an English sub and an English dub, which you may or may not have heard from, which had some choice language. I still think the sentiment's the same. So we had watched... Oh, God, shut up. If we didn't play the scene, I think I'm just gonna play the scene and we'll bleep it. So we played a scene from the movie, and it was from the English dub. And fun fact about it is that they actually have several different jokes that they do in the English dub. So you do get a pretty different script from what some people I was seeing on IMDb were saying, that like a lot of the jokes have been changed in this film. But this is a very interesting film. To clarify, we all watched the dub, so we'll be talking specifically about the dub today.
I watched the sub.
Oh, excuse me, the sub. I meant the sub. Yeah, sorry. We had already talked about this, Chris. Promise you, I watched it.
Just wanted to clarify.
With subtitles. And this is really interesting because this comes from Stephen Chow, who has marked himself as a very famous Chinese filmmaker in the Hong Kong film scene, and directed his first international hit, I believe, was Shaolin Soccer, if I'm not mistaken. And this is like a cult hit, and this is Chris and I were talking off the pod. You know, this film had come out after The Matrix, and there was a kind of a little renaissance of success in martial arts movies because of the success of The Matrix, and that bringing martial arts, kung fu and gun fu to a modern audience certainly started me down a rabbit hole of influences for The Matrix. This is around the time, around 2017, I would have saw Hard Boiled for the first time, and a lot of other Chinese films that kind of influenced it. I never saw this, but Chris, you said this was like a cult hit of yours. You saw this in theaters back in the day. So I'm curious to know, what are your thoughts revisiting it? What were your thoughts then? And let us know. Kung Fu Hustle. What's the hot take, Chris?
I don't know if it's that hot a take, considering
this take's coming in
of this
frozen cold, fresh out of the freezer.
A mild take, considering the popularity of this film. You know, as you mentioned, Christian, this film is somewhat of a cult classic. And I saw this film in theaters back in 2005. I was still in high school, and a couple friends and I went to go see it. And at that time, you know, being very into like Dragon Ball, I absolutely loved this movie. And, you know, having had experience prior to watching this movie with Kung Fu, I enjoyed it that much more. And I have to say, like, this movie is a ton of fun. It is a blast to watch. It is so wildly different from the other movies that we have watched over the course of this month. And I think Stephen Chow has a real cinematic language that he speaks over the course of all of his movies. If you look at Shaolin Soccer and you look at Kung Fu Hustle, and if you look at his adaptation of Journey to the West, they all share very similar cinematic languages, where it's a mixture of kung fu and comedy and CGI, and in some cases horror. But I think you can definitely tell when you're watching a Stephen Chow movie because of the techniques that he utilizes in those films. And as I said, this movie's just so much fun. With all the references in the film, you can tell that Stephen Chow has a real love for cinema as well, and pop culture. There's some fun Looney Tunes references in the film. But as a fan of Kung Fu and anime, if you also like those things, I think you're going to absolutely love what Kung Fu Hustle has to offer to you. Brian, how did you feel about Kung Fu Hustle? You've also seen this movie before, right?
I have. I want to say I saw it the only other time was in college, I believe. So it had been a while. I had rewatched a couple of key scenes since then, some of the classic ones. But yeah, so coming back to this from the beginning, what you said, there is clearly a director at play here. The movie starts with this amazing long oneer that pulls back and ends up going upstairs in a police station and really just sets the tone for where the movie goes from there, I think. The movie, it oozes style. It's nearly all style, which may be to a fault, but it's pure fantasy and just ridiculous, silly fun throughout the majority of the movie. I think because of this, it makes it a little difficult for any of the emotional connection to really resonate deeply. And they're kind of going out of their way to present it in a silly way a lot of time as well. But yeah, I think to the negatives of the movie, I would say it's more style over substance, and ultimately the movie's not really saying all that much outside of the arc that who becomes our main character is, without getting into spoilers.
I think you still have, just to jump in here for a little bit, I think you still have some like prototypical kung fu, themes going on here, which is like, don't judge a book by its cover, like
Sure.
Unexpected masters, don't judge people based on what they look like.
That's completely fair. That definitely is there. And as far as kung fu stories, it is kind of this it is like a rags to riches sort of thing. Not rags to riches, but no, I think that's a fair point, Chris. Aside from that, it may be obvious from the trailer that we played, depending on what ends up being kept in, but there's some pretty blatant homophobia in this movie. There are two characters coded as gay, one of which in the English subs is called a fairy throughout the course of the movie, in a derogative way, and they use another word that I don't even feel comfortable saying.
It's terrible
to call gay people in the English dub. Aside from that, there is another character who's coded as gay, whose ass is just hanging out the whole movie, which it seems completely unnecessary. So that stuff didn't age particularly well. But aside from that, there are so many memorable characters, and the comedy and action and the cartoony nature of it makes this movie kind of stand out. And I don't know, even if I don't find myself coming back to it often, there are moments from it that I'll never forget. So I think it deserves credit for that, even if some of it hasn't aged particularly well.
I'm probably going to come down the hardest on the movie. I to its credit, I don't think I've seen a movie that was made by so many talented people, and clearly a lot of vision and purpose, a lot of thought behind everything, a lot of genuinely funny gags, and even emotional stuff that actually is working for me very well. I've never seen all that coalesce into a movie that I really didn't care for as a whole. Like, I can realize the parts of it and really love and embellish in the craft of it. The movie is consistent, at least, like, even as wild as it is, it still maintains a tonal consistency, which is pretty impressive, again, for how wild it is. So for that, I got to give the filmmakers credit. It's also not made on a huge budget for such a action-forward picture. And, you're largely in one location for a good bit of, like, the action scenes and a lot of the set pieces. Chris, I'm going to say it. The special effects are...
I wanted to mention that, considering the budget, and that's a through line through all of Stephen Chow's films. The budget's just not there to support the type of special effects, CGI effects in particular, that he's trying to use.
I just want to say, so there was a Black Widow level of a character falling and hitting things on the way down. It looked terrible in this movie, and it took me out of it for a moment. But I actually found myself appreciating how cartoonish and like blatantly Looney Tunes like it was.
Because in this movie, it's supposed to be
right.
Looney
So I think
Tunes-esque.
it kind of gives it a charm that it's
Again,
like,
the thing
okay,
that
we all
saves
know it's
it.
bad, but it's so silly and fun that we're fine with it.
And if anything, it's consistent.
Right.
Part of the problem with the Marvel movies is just inconsistent. So I can give it the credit for that. It's just there's some decisions made there's a point in which the characters, in a reference to Shaolin soccer, I believe, it grabs a soccer ball and bounces on his foot and then crushes it. And the soccer ball is completely CG, and it's like there's really not a good reason, even budgetary, that I can think of that you just wouldn't have a real soccer ball. Like, you're doing like kung fu stuff. You can't pops it on his leg 3 times. It's like, it's not an easy thing to do, but you're only seeing his legs. Like, find someone who can play soccer. It's like, I don't know. There seems to be an easier solve. So I don't appreciate.
I don't think you're wrong. I'm not going to disagree with you.
There's a scene in which there's this dysmorphic body thing that happens that just is weird looking. It's just really strange. And some of the shots, they just look.
They talk about the twisties.
No, I'm talking about the snakes. The snakes. There's a scene with snakes, and there's poison that happens.
Okay. Yeah.
Anyway, it looks really weird and bad. So it's just that really looks terrible. It reminded me of a movie that I don't think is as good. But what was that movie that's a lot of nuts. What's that film?
Kung Pao. Enter the Fist.
This is like a better version of Kung Pao in a lot of ways because it feels more genuine, and it really is. Like, you can tell it's a lot like it's a lot more Chinese. Obviously, it seems like it should be on the nose, but it's very culturally Chinese, which I think is good. With, again, some style influences from Western and some more. God, I keep hitting my mic. I'm sorry. From like more Western films, and then also from like Japanese anime. Clearly, heavily influenced the creation of this. And it's just not altogether working for me. The homophobic stuff is interesting because I don't even think they would have been able to do this in modern day China. Honestly, I don't think this movie would have got made like this. Not because it's offensive, because there actually is sympathetic elements to the homophobic characters, and I don't think that would fly. I don't think they would actually be able to release even having the characters in there. Which is really sad, right? And so I think it's actually a regression in modern day. Whereas the characters, there are some of that language used, but some of those characters end up being very, very capable, right? People. So I think there's some saving grace there where there is some recognition. Yeah. And there's really kind of a cultural thing in China to not even recognize the fact that men could be effeminate or anything like that. So, take it for what you will. This movie at least doesn't completely just shit on characters for no reason. I mean, obviously there's a little silliness to it, and it hasn't aged well, but they're there, and there's more than one, and they're represented, and some of them are, one of them is a very capable like fighter, who's very masculine in the way that he fights, right? And so it's not completely stereotypical. So for that, I'll give it credit. So yeah, it's just like, it's a weird. When we get into spoilers in moments, this is just the strangest movie I've ever seen, and it could possibly due to like I probably would have really liked it when I was younger, which is saying something about the quality of the film. Like, I don't think that's a necessarily derogatory thing. I think it's just for younger audiences. I think this is really like definitely the teen boy demographic. I think this is all for. But coming at it as a 30-year-old man.
Seeing it for the first time, I can see how it would rub you this way.
And I also don't think, in my closing statement, so we can move on into spoilers, I don't think that all the choreography is working for me. I just think if there's one thing inconsistent, it's like the rules of everything and you actually getting engaged with any of the combat. Like, to me, this was the least inventive. Even with its, I don't mind super moves and supernatural stuff. It's just there was a lot less to dig into and appreciate about the choreography. Still, again, better than Kung Pao or any other attempts that have tried this in certainly the Western genre, or Western films that have tried something like a kung fu comedy like this. But just to me, inconsistent. And I didn't really feel anything besides kind of this interest that we have between two parties that I think is actually beautifully done. And again, that's to finalize the point of Stephen Chow knows how to frame stuff and make it work. There's a beautiful like 360 move where our characters go through some time and like we're back in a place we were, and it's really beautiful. It's like actually pretty incredible filmmaking in my opinion. Like it really works, and it's like kind of old Hollywood, but with that new style you were talking about, Brian. So a lot of stuff I like about the film. Just collectively, it's just it's fucking strange, man. It's just really weird. But let's any thoughts before we go into spoilers?
I don't know if any of us have said, I think the writing in this movie is really funny. And it's a combination of the writing and the delivery by the characters. But there are some lines that just killed me that I won't spoil here. But yeah, I think the movie is really smartly written at times, especially.
I agree.
Yeah,
I agree.
Yeah, no, I agree too. And it's more like there's moments of that, you know. It has a lot of really great moments. It just, for me, it just doesn't work overall. But let's dive a little deeper and go into spoilers starting now. So, spoilers beginning now. Well, let's talk about some of our favorite moments in the film. Chris, let's start with you.
You know, I'm a sucker for what I was talking about earlier, which is this theme of like, don't judge a book by its cover, that we find very prevalent in the martial arts genre. Akira Toriyama loves this particular theme. You'll find it everywhere throughout Dragon Ball. I mean, Goku himself as a main character, especially in Dragon Ball, is like a very small young boy who's incredibly powerful. And you find that a lot here in Kung Fu Hustle with all of our like master martial artists. They're all seemingly average people to the, you know, to passerby, to the average eye, but they're all exceptionally powerful in their own right. And I really dig that theme. I also like this idea of rebirth with our main character, Xing, becoming, you know, coming from this like really annoying kind of poor person, not very capable, but like has inner strength to him. And then we get this whole butterfly metaphor with him becoming enlightened and like being able to use the Buddhist palm and stuff. I love all that stuff. And that's from, you know, having an affection for shonen anime growing up, I think. So the final scene in this movie where he's fighting off against the beast, and we get to see this really cool kind of anime-esque fight. It's fun to see it in live action. I will say that it doesn't always work in film. When I was doing my research, I actually came to the realization that Stephen Chow was a producer on Dragon Ball Evolution, which made me really sad. Because that is a terrible movie. But I still think it works really well in this movie. And I like it a lot.
Chris, I will say, this will make you happy. This movie is better by a million miles than Dragon Ball Evolution.
Oh, absolutely. No question. No question. There are really smart jokes, as Brian mentioned, throughout the film. And one that really got me is a language-based joke. And there's a moment when one of the characters is dying in another character's arm, and his final words are spoken in English. He's a Chinese man speaking English, and then the character that's holding him goes, "Why didn't you speak Chinese?" For like and this is a bit that has a reprisal. It comes back again in the movie, and I love that so much. I think it's an excellent script and a ton of fun.
Very cool. Brian, some of your favorite moments.
So the first scene, the original leader of the Axe Gang, when he starts dance fighting, it's just so silly and awesome, and transitioning into what I think makes it entirely, the whole gang dancing as we're getting the montage of their past crimes. It just felt like it's just such a old school, like 1920s gangster vibe, Western as well. It's a combination of so many things that I was just having so much fun. And it
also sets the tone really well for the rest of the movie.
100%. And it's completely ridiculous. So yeah, you kind of get it. So yeah, that's one of my favorites. Christian, the knives bit is hilarious for me. It's so stupid.
It's so good.
But I love it.
It reminded me of like who the guys who made Dumb and Dumber. The
Farrelly brothers.
The Farrelly brothers.
Farrelly brothers. It reminded me of like a funny bit that they would have done, right? So that's where that humor's coming in. So good with his portly friend. Their relationship's super funny. Yeah.
Oh yeah, definitely really good. And it climaxes in that insane chase scene, which is great as well, where he sees the reflection of Landlady in the knife on his shoulder. Just masterful stuff.
And his the friend, the portly friend goes, He goes, "Where'd the other knife?" He goes to throw the hilt, or he goes to throw the knife, and then blade gets stuck, and then he throws the hilt of the knife at the lady, and then turns around and goes, "Where'd that other knife come from?" And he goes, "Does it belong to that?" No, it couldn't be. It's a new knife. Like in disbelief that a new knife had appeared. So stupid.
It's everything between them is really funny. Couple other moments. It's kind of subtle, but when we're introduced to the harpist and what they can do, we see a cat and it jumps off screen. It gets sliced in half and then blood splatters where the shadow was. And it's just like, again, really, really amazing stuff.
And very inventive in a moment where I'm like, oh shit, like that's an amazing moment. And then like, oh, this like flinging harp thing has no rules and nothing matters.
And it keeps building and just becomes more physical. You know what it reminded me of a bit? Do you remember, this is a tangent, but there's a movie called The Big Green, which is probably a terrible old soccer movie.
It's trying to be The Sandlot, but for soccer.
Yes, exactly. One of our goalie character in that imagines people and in like night uniforms.
Yes.
This is what the progression of the harps becoming like more physical kind of reminded me of. But the couple of references you mentioned, Chris, I had to pause it because it happens really quick. But Xing has, who we later realize is the mute girl, at knife point, and he's holding her in this way that's mimicking the Top Hat poster behind him, and it's just beautiful cinema stuff like that.
The image of the lollipop too throughout, like that's kind of in reference to a lotus flower.
It's the same sort of reveal from Ip Man, right?
Yeah.
Or a very similar reveal in that sort of can. Lastly, the Shining reference as well. Amazing.
Of course.
Yes.
It's got a Shining
so
reference.
good.
You know, Brian's going to be happy.
Yeah, I'm obsessed with The Shining. Lastly, I shouted out earlier, but the twisties that happen, I don't know what else to call them, but in the fight scene between Landlady and Landlord and the Beast, where they start just like spinning things and there's some CG weirdness where everything is just spinning. It was completely ridiculous.
Where like they go to like punch the Beast or something, and he grabs their fists and then twists their arms out of their sleeves.
Yes.
It's a very anime thing.
It was completely off the wall, but there was something about it. Was like, okay, it was a good progression of fights, because I think some of my favorite fights are kind of front loaded in this movie, maybe. Although it does progressively get bigger, but yeah, those are my favorites, I think.
I also love, those are some great points. I love the shots where people are in fights, and then like there's always this like wide shot of like all the extras in insane poses and stuff, like through windows and up hanging out of a door, and just like they just were going around and be like, what's the silliest place we could put one of these extras in? It's very funny. I got one scene that I'm going to point out as my absolute favorite, because it's when it's just being like super silly and the visual gags are really working, and you can only accomplish this in a movie like this. Where kind of our main character, I mean, he's our main character, is trying to like, I don't know, he's trying to blackmail him into a free haircut or something. You know, he's like saying his haircut was too pretty. And then you
made him look too good.
You made him look too good. And then they kind of sniff him out and go like, you're not nothing. And he's like pretending to be part of the Axe gang. And then he's threatening to take on everybody in the increasingly absurd gags of like, you're old, fight me, old timer. And this like super buff dude. And it's like, oh, I want the short guy. And then the short guy stands up and it's like, he's like 8 feet tall. He's like, okay, no, not
Christian, the line, he says, if you're short, you don't retort. Just a stupid pun. And then this giant stands up.
And that humor is really credit to, and it's a reason too why they rewrote it for the English dub. And why this is probably more successful with American audiences is whoever did the translation was able to, they must have had a really great partnership. I probably should have done some research. But there was either Stephen Chow having a lot of input, speaking English natively, speaking English as well as Mandarin, and being able to actually write good American jokes. Because as Stephen has said, like when they've said, oh, would you remake an American version of this film? He's on record saying like, you only remake something if it's like, going to improve upon something, but like, why would I remake a Western version of this? This movie is about Chinese youth culture.
To that point, I do want to point out, it was announced recently that we're getting a Kung Fu Hustle 2.
Okay, so a
So
sequel.
I'm very excited about that.
But
so
is-
I mean, he is coming back to this type of movie.
Interesting.
Kung Tu Hustle. It's right there. It's right there, Steven.
Take it. So like, I really do want to shout out like the fact they translated it into a very funny thing for American audiences is something to be light, and probably the reason it doesn't connect fully with me is I'm not a Chinese. I'm not the Chinese youth of 2004. So I think that adds a lot of cultural distance between my enjoyment of this film and what the film is. Right. One thing I want to point out is oh god, I just forgot it. I thought about it and then we talked about the twisties. I have another point in comparisons.
I'm so glad we're calling them the Twisties now.
The Twisties.
I locked it in.
Hashtag the Twisties.
Moving on into like comparing this against other films, one similarity I've seen is in like all superhero movies, whether it's MCU, DCU, or the other Sony stuff that came out before, Fox stuff. Whenever you get to the end of a climactic fight scene with your superhero, it's important that you remove the mask at some point. Does it get burned away by a pumpkin bomb? Does their character take it off to reveal themselves to their one true love? Does it get blasted away by something else? Does something happen? Does the nanotech do its bullshit nano stuff? Who knows? And the equivalent in literally every single movie we've seen is that our main hero's shirt gets removed. 100% of the time. It has to get removed. This has happened in every single film. Our character is at some point reduced down, when things get real serious, is reduced down to bare chest. I think the one
to that point, I just want to chime in here really quick. Christian, can you recall a single instance in which Goku has defeated an enemy while wearing a shirt?
Never. You can't. It's impossible.
It's just part of the genre, I think.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I'm saying, like, I think we could say that it's in order to be a true kung fu movie, you must have shirt removed by end of fight scene. It's an absolutely critical thing. What other comparisons and differences do we mark between this through line of kung fu movies that we've watched?
Honestly, in terms of fantasy, I think this movie actually has quite a bit in common with Shang-Chi. There are wuxia elements in this film, more so than in, Legend of Drunken Master or Enter the Dragon or even Ip Man. Those are all more grounded movies. But in terms of this film, Shang-Chi had a ton of fantastic elements to it, especially in the third act. So yeah, I think those two films are most closely related to one another.
Interesting,
in terms
I
of
think
all the movies that we've watched over the course of the month.
Isn't it really
Brian,
a blend of Shang-Chi and Drunken Master? Because it feels like it's this comedy, but it's more absurdist comedy, and it's definitely leaning in more mystic. So it's like if Drunken Master had a more mystical comedic element, right? So.
Right, if they kind of like merged,
which I think is interesting that this is one of the newer films. In like if you're looking at the pantheon of kung fu movies, obviously I think it's the second. It's like in the midpoint of all the movies we've talked about this month.
Yeah, Ip Man came out after this,
but Ip Man is very much like, although it's definitely more cinematic and it's using modern, especially like color palettes in it. It's like a historical thing. Like as far as the kind of surrealist, absurdist comedy that are of like this generation of millennials, this is the only film with that, besides like obviously Shang-Chi and stuff, which just has the typical Marvel sprinkles. But this is really a mark of its generation in film, right? A bunch of young kids that grew up on film, starting to make films, and this is the kind of weird shit we got. I have to shout out the inflated scene too. I didn't mention that before, but where he gets bit by the snakes, and it actually is a
his
precursor.
Lips are very, very swollen.
It's disgusting and absurd.
It is hard to look at. It's
just
not
weird
good.
And horrifying. And it's also
they're so purple.
And they just
it does make me uncomfortable.
It looked like he wouldn't be able to walk. He'd just be falling over from.
Yeah, it just was very painful. I saw a lady with no jaw. God rest her soul. It was horrific. But not since that have I seen something that's disturbed me so much from just a physical element. It was awful. If you ever see a person with no jaw, that's a tough life I wish on no one. It's very, very hard. And it gave me that kind of body, like, it's so different and so not the way that you just see something consistently for your whole life, that it's just very disturbing. And it looks like shit because it's CG.
It was so off-putting. I had nearly forgotten that it was supposed to be from the snake bites, because it's just so far beyond what you'd expect like swelling to even look like. But
it's also interesting from a lore perspective, because they hint at the fact that he has like Wolverine-like healing powers. You know, because he comes back, he's like, you always heal very fast. And you're like, oh yeah, he has like something special about him, which is interesting. Brian, what other comparisons and differences can you make between these films?
Yeah, so Chris, you brought up Shang-Chi. I think the obvious connection, did you bring up the fighting with the rings? I don't know what they're actually called. I should have looked this up. But one of our masters fights with rings around his arm. So, which I thought it was really well done and completely different from how they're presented in Shang-Chi. Obviously, they're not as mystical. He's got some sort of powers where he's able to control them. But all that stuff was really cool. And I thought that was a cool connection. The other connections were really with Ip Man. And I guess, you know, these are the closest in age to each other. But the idea of the master saying, we are ordinary people, you know, I found that very similar to the idea of Ip Man saying, I'm a Chinese citizen, or whatever the line was in Ip Man.
I'm a Chinese man.
I'm a Chinese man, right? This idea of everyone having this sort of spirit within them. And then the lollipop in the box, this just pure cinematic language that provides the emotional core of our main character's journey. It was really beautiful. And having just watched Ip Man for the first time, I was just like, oh, wow, okay. This is really awesome how there's this thing that's very different on one level, but so directly the same there. The silly nature of it, Christian, to your point, definitely brings it closer in tone. I think the closest in tone is definitely Drunken Master in terms of the movie itself, though.
Brian, all great points. Nothing more to say there. Certainly. Let's wrap up our thoughts on Kung Fu Hustle. Chris, you love it. Brian, you're meh. I'm pretty meh. So this sums it up, right? I still give it a recommend. It's weird to say after I said so many disparaging things, but I do think it's very competently made. If you're into anime, if you're into like Chinese lore, you want to go down this, you're into fun kung fu movies, again, it's better than Kung Pao. It's definitely more genuine, and it's got a more heartfelt story. I've seen Kung Pao in forever, but that seems very cynical to me in like retrospect. But and that's a very different kind of movie, actually. So,
in wrapping up, even though the CG is not particularly good in this movie, I thought the action was a lot of fun. We haven't talked a lot about it, but even I think it does not to the same extent as Ip Man, where I think there's some CG happening there that's a lot more well disguised and not as all over the place, so it's able to be. But I think it does a really good job of, even with the cartoonish nature, sometimes giving us some really impactful blows, and real physicality is still very obviously happening, even if there's a lot of acrobatics and CG happening as well. I actually really enjoyed a lot of the fight sequences.
Yeah, I was happy when it found this balance between cartoonish and kind of the traditional kung fu stuff. And it was when it went over the top in either direction, where it tried to sell us on like real fighting, when it was like, okay, but this is like all ridiculous stuff. Or when it went so ridiculous where he's falling from the sky with his fist out. You know, it's like, it wasn't any of those things.
Red Bull guy ain't got shit on Tsang.
It was kind of like, but the kind of the balance that I'm talking about is like, we get a scene of a character punching someone in the chest and the back of their shirt blows out. We get like, you know what I mean? Like, that's like classic anime badassery. Just really, that stuff's really cool. I think when the guys are shooting the knives, although I think that scene is entirely way too long. We talked about the cat thing, but there's also,
I'd agree with that. Yeah, that's probably true.
Where the guy gets hit by all of them and the guy's dodging it. And you're seeing like it dart before the CG swords appear, so they can like tell the audience what's going on, I guess. You know, some of that stuff is very artfully done and really, really nice. And then think about how the scene with the beast, when they introduce the beast and he's just got these super powerful kicks, and then he jumps through the wall of the casino and like kicks the craps table or roulette table, whatever it was, right down the center I mean, all that stuff's really cool. Like, there's no
Great.
Oh yeah.
Great fight choreography. It's not at the same level the other movies we've watched, like Ip Man or Drunken Master, because it's not solely, fist to fist. There are fantastic elements to it. But I really appreciate that about this movie. And I think if you're this goes without saying, but like if you're a fan of the genre and you haven't seen Kung Fu Hustle, you're gonna love this movie. You're gonna get a lot out of it. Going back and rewatching all of these Kung Fu movies over the course of the last month really has reinvigorated my love for these films. I loved getting a chance to revisit a lot of these movies. And going forward, I think I'm going to, go even further into the genre and search for things that I haven't seen so far.
Yeah, it's been a really cool month. I want to do the martial arts month so we can broaden it up and get that damn Raid Redemption in there. Because
Karate Kid, Raid Redemption, Three Ninjas, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
The undeniable classics of the genre.
don't you dare lump the Raid Redemption in between Karate Kid and Three Ninjas, you ass. Like the Raid, you've seen the Raid Redemption, right?
I haven't.
Oh, you
no.
son of a bitch.
I want to.
You dirty dog. You both had seen Kung Fu Hustle. Listen, I'm glad I watched it. I wasn't watching it the entire time going, this movie's goofy as shit. We're doing a disservice to this genre because the Raid Redemption is the true undisputed current martial arts champion, in my opinion. Raid Redemption, untouched in modern cinema with martial arts. And we have to watch it just to prove it. It's the king of the castle, in my opinion. Raid Redemption, doesn't get any better than that. But we're not talking about Raid Redemption, and Christian's not bitter that we didn't cover it in the Kung Fu month, because it's technically not Kung Fu. It's technically in the broader martial arts genre. And Christian understands that. Okay, this is Kung Fu Legends. And it's like mixed martial arts there. And knife fights. Really badass, awesome knife fights. But anyway, let's summate this month. Gentlemen, what did we learn about Kung Fu? What did we learn about Kung Fu today? And yesterday? Nothing at all. That'll do it for the show.
What have we learned about Kung Fu, Christian? I think that we've learned that to master a martial art, it takes exceptional mastery of one's body. And I think over the course of these last 5 weeks, we have gotten to see some people who are like genuinely true athletes and masters of their art. It's incredibly difficult to make one of these movies. And this month has made me appreciate everything that these people have had to go through to bring this type of entertainment to us.
Yeah, and the fact that you can... I think what's so interesting to me is the insane diversity of styles that can be on display, and how, to some extent, these movies work solely as a display of martial arts and people who are just amazing athletes doing incredible choreography. So I think that's kind of what has impressed me most about all of it this month.
Yeah, I think one thing is like really clear, like looking back on this entire month, is just how everything they're doing, it has to be hard to do in order for it to up the game. There's so many in this genre, like you said, there's a wide variety of it, and to really pull off the impressive stuff, these people are risking limb and body to make this happen. I mean, there are many of these athletes, whether it's pro wrestling to martial arts, to, Kung Fu specifically, that have lost their lives doing this, stunt people as well as actors. And it's really impressive, and definitely we really appreciate it and appreciate what all these actors and stunt choreographers and everything go through. And it's really hard to make one of these scenes work. Shang-Chi has a very, 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 very impressive train scene, and it's everybody's favorite, or bus scene. It's a train of a bus, as we said. And it's the most impressive thing I've seen in a Marvel movie in a long time. And these films are full of that kind of stuff. And then you look into what it took to make it happen. And not to say that we're soft in this era, but like it takes a lot to do that. It's not easy, and it should be really like appreciated. And it really does pay off in a big way. It makes some of our favorite moments in these types of films, and you can see it. And it's interesting because you're always looking for these actors. Like for instance, in Kung Fu Hustle, this main actor is a subpar. Stephen Chow's character is a very subpar martial artist. Like he talks about always looking up to Bruce Lee and all this stuff. But he himself has admits, like, I realized I was never going to be that good. Like, I just don't. I'm just that man was insane, right? It was like his hero, and he idolized him. But he leaned into what he was good at, right? Which was comedy and his impressive way of like making something incredibly cinematic. I'd say this film is technically more cinematic than Ip Man as far as like cinematic style and choices, right? Ip Man takes one very dedicated style and just that's it. And this movie is, quite frankly, all over the place, but shows a lot of talent and a lot of love for the art of film. So each of these people bring in their own thing to it. Simu Liu brings in a very modern, very American sensibility while talking about the roots of Chinese culture and him being a Canadian, Chinese Canadian. Just like bringing their own sense of style to the art. And it's that layer on top of the athleticism that's so impressive, and it's something I greatly appreciate. And it's one thing to act. We all know on this podcast, acting, it's hard, but like being a good actor and then being an insanely good athlete while also having the chops to like use your body for seriousness or comedy or drama in such a physical way, it's so impressive. And that's what's so cool about this genre. And that's why I think so many people love it. And it crosses a very diverse spectrum of people that enjoy this work. So I can't wait to watch The Raid Redemption again. Again, not a kung fu movie, but man, every movie we've watched, I've gone like, oh God, I just love that movie so much. And I love all the stuff that we've watched, to be clear, to a certain degree. So it's just all very impressive, very awesome. And that's us talking about some Kung Fu legends.
We did it. What a month.
We did it. Wah. Wah. We did it without making a single wah joke.
You just ruined it.
No, I didn't. I made a joke
got
about
to the very end.
It's self-referential. Have you not seen Bo Burnham shit? As long as you reference that it's not cool, it's cool. Super cool.
I've not seen Bo Burnham shit.
Them's the rules. I didn't make them. Chris, we've gotten through our Kung Fu Legends month. What do we have in store for next month?
Christian, I'm so excited for next month because after many reschedulings and many moves,
you've got to change it a little
years,
bit for copyright. It's got to be dun 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 dun.
We are finally having a James Bond month. Yes, because No Time to Die is finally being released in October. Yes. We finally get to rewatch all of the Daniel Craig James Bond movies. And next week, we're going to be kicking off the James Bond month with both Casino Royale and Quantum of Solace.
Big boy.
So get ready, loyal listeners. We're talking Bond all next month.
It was inappropriate for them to release this film at the start of the pandemic because that was, in fact, the time to die. Jesus Christ. We have to change the melody, Chris.
Sorry.
I'm very excited for that. Does the COVID joke stay in there? Probably not. It's horrific. What a terrible time it's been. But at least we're getting a James Bond film. Am I right?
Oh, yeah.
Can't wait. Oh, yeah. Very excited for that. So all that and more, we're going to be covering all the James Bonds. I'm saying it right now. Every single one of the films will be covered in detail. Boys, hope you got your box sets ready. No, we will be covering choice selects from the Daniel Craig. Well, all the Daniel Craigs, right?
We're going to be watching every Daniel Craig film leading up to No Time to Die.
His final one. What a perfect time. What a perfect time not to die. What a perfect time to watch some films. You can find more of Pop-O-Holics by searching our link tree in the show notes. You can also find us on social media. We have a YouTube page. All that stuff's linked down there. Please check it out. Send us an email at popholicscast@gmail.com, as well as rate us 5 stars on iTunes. Really appreciate that if you've enjoyed the content of the show. Boys, where can people find more of your work on the internet?
Loyal listeners, you can find me on Twitter at Chris Conkling, talking about all things nerdy.
And you can find me at True Pop-O-Holic.
You can find my band at Midnight Satire. AR now streaming. Got a lot of music coming out. Appreciate all the support been getting there. Been very successful so far, and I have to thank part of that to the Pop-O-Holics team. So let's go ahead and wrap things up. We'll see you next month when we're talking. We got our weekly uploads that come out every Monday, and we're talking about just generic what's going on in pop culture. And for our Bond month, very exciting. All that and more on
Cherry Poppin' Daddies.
The show.